places.
Okay. As I always say, you don't know what you don't know. That's why it's really important to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. When it comes to property and mortgages, quite often there's a lot of miscommunication and there are a lot of myths that surround getting a mortgage, credit, and things of that nature. So today we're going to be talking about how to improve your credit score. We're going to be speaking with someone that I've really got to know well over the past couple of years. Her name is Pauline. Her career began in interior design, where she established a strong portfolio in planning, project management, construction, design management, and on-site health and safety. She has a passion for health and well-being and used her diet to recover from a long-term illness. But I'm going to let Pauline talk about herself once we get up and running. But first, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Anthony Lindsay, and I've been in finance for over 30 years. And I've done everything from wealth management to debt collections to lending. I'm a licensed mortgage broker in the UK. We're going to unpack the top 3 questions that I get around credit and mortgages. So question number one is, what credit score do I need to be approved for a mortgage? The next question I get asked a lot is, why is the interest rate on my mortgage not lower? And what if rates go down after my mortgage offer is accepted? These are some of the things that I'll be discussing, as well as how to improve your credit score. As I said, I've been in finance for over 30 years, so I do know a thing or two. As always, we do have to do the disclaimer that your property may be repossessed if you do not keep up your repayments on your mortgage. Now, a lot of people don't realize that you should always talk to a mortgage broker. And the reason why you want to use a mortgage broker is because a mortgage broker is going to speak or deal with lots of different banks. Now, I've been a bank manager for HSBC, for Lloyds, for Capital One, and several other banks. And I know that my staff are really well trained, but I also know that when you go directly to the bank, they're only able to talk to you about their products and their services. So going to a broker is going to give you more choice. And especially if you have issues around credit, going to a mortgage broker will give you access to specialist lenders who will take into consideration any bumps that you may have had in the past with your credit. Looking at your credit is going to come down to 3 key factors when getting a mortgage. It's your credit score, that's your credit score / profile, your income, and your deposit. So if we look at the first one, is your credit profile. Now, I differentiate between your credit profile and your credit score because your credit profile goes above and beyond just a number. Your credit profile is going to look at how you pay your bills, how and when and if you've ever had any missed payments, late payments, CCJs, or anything of that nature. So you could have an instance where someone has a high credit score. However, they have had some missed payments in the last 6 months, which means some of the high street lenders would not be able to assist them in that instance. So you might end up going to a specialist lender. Another thing that might have happened is you may have had some satisfied or unsatisfied CCJs. CCJs are county court judgments. And the specialist lenders are going to look at those type of things to determine what kind of loan they're going to give you and also what credit rating or credit interest rate that you will get. Here are a few tips on how to improve your credit score pretty quickly. Now, this is going to sound counterintuitive when I say this, but one of the things that you do want to do is if you're offered a credit limit increase by one of your credit card companies, take it. Now, as I said, it does sound counterintuitive, but one of the reasons why you do want to take those credit limit increases is because it shows that your credit worthiness is improving. And you will find that in many instances, if you don't take credit limit increases and or if you don't use the credit limit that you do have, guess what? They will often reduce your credit limit. And that happened to me. I remember I had a Barclay card, which in preparing to get a mortgage, I had paid off the Barclay card. I stopped using it. And Barclay card actually reduced my credit limit and eventually closed my credit account because I wasn't using it. So you want to make sure that you accept the increases. This will give you a boost to your overall credit score. Another thing to consider is when to pay. Some people, what they do is as soon as they have used the credit card, what they'll do is they'll pay off the balance. You don't want to do that. And the reason why you don't want to do that is because there are two key dates on your credit card, and it's the statement date and the due date. The statement date is the date that the statement is produced. The statement date is what generates the communication between that credit card company and the credit reporting agencies. So what that means is if let's just say your statement date on your credit card is on the 15th. You use your credit card on the 2nd and then pay it off on the 3rd. By the time it comes through to that statement date, your balance will be zero. So it will register as if you haven't used the card. And the whole point of building a credit rating is showing how you manage your finances. So what you want to do is use the credit card. You don't want to pay it off in full before the statement date, but you want to make sure that by the time the statement date comes around, you're not overutilizing your available credit. So you don't want to be using like 90% of your available credit. The safe zone is between 3 and 10% if you want to boost your credit rating. And then make sure you have a direct debit set up that you never miss a payment, never make a late payment. The other thing is utilization. So utilization is looking at how much available credit you have versus how much available credit you use. So if your credit limit is £1,000 and you are using 999 pounds of that, your utilization is about 99%, and that's not good. So you do want to keep that utilization low, but there's a difference between the cumulative utilization and the individual. So what I mean by that, if you have 5 credit cards and each of them have £1,000 credit limit, you may have 2 that you're utilizing at a very high rate and the other 3 with 0% or a low percentage. Your cumulative score may be quite low, but then those 2 that you're utilizing at a higher rate are going to have a high utilization. So it would make more sense to spread those balances across all the cards that each individual card has a low utilization. And lastly, just let's look at some strategies of quickly putting yourself in a situation where you can get the very best mortgage. So now you've worked on your credit, you've improved your credit. You want to increase your income in any way you can. So we're going to have Pauline, and Pauline will be talking about being a landlord. And property is one way of generating an additional income. And that will also spill over into having a higher deposit. So as a rule of thumb, the higher the deposit you have, the less hurdles you're going to need to get over as far as credit scores and even income. Because the more you're paying down, the lower the loan to valuation is, the more lenders will be able to look at you. And at the end of the day, it's all about choice. So those were just a few really quick tips on how to improve your credit rating. I'm going to introduce Pauline. And Pauline, as I said, is someone that I've got to know over the last few years and is someone that I really value knowing. She is the administrator, I should say, or leader or owner of SmartLandlords. Pauline, it's so great to have you here. You know that ever since joining your group, I've been a big fan. You've been a great supporter of pretty much everything that I do. You moderated one of the panels at the East London Property Expo and did an amazing job. And last minute, you brought some fantastic panelists. So I just want to thank you and welcome you this evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on your show today, Anthony. Thank you. Yes. And it was like, what do they say? They say diamonds are made under pressure, aren't they?
Yes.
So yes, and it was a great event, and I've made many connections that I've kept up with. And one of the things actually that I don't think I've ever mentioned to you, this year's I reconnected with an old friend, and it's so lovely to kind of meet somebody that you've known for years. We'd kind of dropped off each other's radar,
Yeah.
so that's what the power of kind of going to these in-person events is that exchange of expertise, and that kind of being amongst people that you want to emulate, and also the connections that you make. It was
And
very
and
cool.
and one thing you may not know, because this happens several times at events that I've been at where you are, there are people that are there and they're saying, I've been a part of the Smart Landlords group for a while, but I've never met Pauline. And it's just, it's good having that experience where people have known you or even listened to your radio show. So there's
Yeah.
lots of people that listen to your radio show. And during this conversation, I do want you to talk about your radio show. And I know we've had some discussions around the Renters' Right Bill and the abolition of Section 21. And you are an expert in many areas and you bring a lot of people together. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and just find out a little bit more about, let's just start with the Renters' Right Bill. So what can you tell us about that?
So at the moment, it's gone through the Commons. So I think this government almost did a cut and paste of what the last government had started, but with more of a judicial feel to it. But unfortunately, because the Labour government are inexperienced, they're not as business savvy as the Conservatives are, and I think less of them are possibly landlords. So they don't really have that perspective of
Mm.
really knowing how things work. So it's a little bit cat-handed. But anyway, they've said that they needed to abolish Section 21. Um, I was a landlord from the mid-80s until about 8 years ago. But I remain in the industry because I provide all the services to landlords. So I'm a domestic energy assessor, I do inventories, I'm a fire risk assessor, and so on. So if you've got a HMO, I can bring along a few more people and we can do all the checks that you'd ever need to have, including floor plans, in one session. And we've done that, for quite a few people. In fact, quite a few people that are in the landlords groups across WhatsApp. And during that period, I've never used the Section 21. I've always got people out via agreed surrender. I've always, yeah. And sometimes it was all about being compassionate and understanding and just giving that person some breathing space and then communicating to them, I don't want you to accumulate arrears, because if you do, my policy is to pursue you to the very end. And it could go on for years into after this relationship has ended. I might not I might not contact you for 5 years and 11 months. But if I do catch up with you, the clock starts again for that 6 years, doesn't it?
Yeah. Now I am seeing some people scratching their head. So let's just start and take away some of the jargon. So how would you explain, or what is the Renters' Right Bill for those people who don't know?
Okay, for those who don't know, so the Renters' Rights Bill was a set of reforms to the whole of the private rented sector to give tenants additional security of tenure and to stop them being victimized by what they would call, they use this word a lot, rogue landlords. So landlords who are non-responsive to repair issues, landlords who neglect their tenants, landlords where the tenant might have damp problems or very specific problems and they're not being addressed properly. And so and then the Section 21, a lot of tenants groups felt that being able to evict somebody without fault was with over quite a short period. So somebody could live somewhere for many, many years, and then within say 6 months you might be out. Well, of course the courts have slowed that down now, but they kind of felt that that was very horrible. So they've always called for the abolition of Section 21. I will tell you later on what the catch with that is and why it's not going to help all tenants.
Okay, that's going to be interesting. Now, I've always felt with most things, and particularly with things in the economy, there's a an economist that I like, and Andrew Wright and I always seem to have conversations around the approach as far as social housing, etc. But one of the things that Thomas Sowell says is in the economy, there are no solutions, just compromises. So it sounds to me from what you were saying, the renters' right bill was put together to protect people who are renting so that they have a little bit more security, they have more rights. But the problem that I see quite often in these things is it depends where you sit. If you are a renter, then those additional rights, those additional benefits are probably music to your ears. However, if you're a landlord, and especially, and I like how you brought out the term that is used so often, the rogue landlords. What if you're not a rogue landlord? What if you are an individual that instead of maybe having a traditional pension, property is your pension, and you're
Well,
using that to have something to retire? What if you're a great landlord, but you have a bad tenant? I think that's the
exactly.
other side
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
coin.
And that's one of the things I say is what if you're facing a rogue tenant, a professional tenant who knows all the little schemes. So they come in, they're lovely, they pay their rent for a very short period of time, and then they just sit there and wreck your property. What about that? So in law, in legislation, in regulations, in the judicial system, you're only a rogue landlord if you go through a judicial process and you end up with some kind of penalty enforcement action and your name is put on a particular list. Then you are a rogue landlord. Otherwise, we're all just landlords. We're all just landlords offering a fairly unique service in a sector that was growing up until George Osborne put his boots in. And we provide an important function directly to private tenants and sometimes through local authorities. And what the Renters' Rights Bill aims to do is to cut out those relationships with agents and particularly with rent to renters, and for you to then give your property to the council instead to help them with their very hefty backlog of tenants they've got, which is growing by the day. And the commentators, the property commentators, don't say this enough. So going back to what I was saying about the abolition of Section 21 harming tenants.
All right, so before we go into that, because I know that you know this inside out, but we always have people that are maybe looking or considering becoming a landlord. So all of the terms won't be as clear to them. So you talked about Section 21. What exactly is Section 21?
So it's the means of regaining possession. So you give your tenant a notice. It's normally for 2 months. Under the Renters' Rights Bill, that will change, but at the moment it's 2 months. And then at that date, they're supposed to leave. If they don't leave, you then have to go for a court process. So there are two routes. One is called a Section 21, where you don't have to state a reason, you just want your property back. There are a couple of caveats to that. And then there's Section 8. So these are sections from the Housing Act 2004. So Section 21 kind of outlines the no fault eviction route. And then Section 8 talks about if you have various grounds. So at the moment, there's about 20 grounds. With the renters bill coming in, it'll be 30 odd grounds, which cover every scenario. So it's going to be possible to kind of not have very much of a ground and still find a ground within the new grounds that you'll be able to use. So breach of contract might be the one that becomes the default kind of, non-specific, because in a well-constructed contract, there's always going to be a breach.
Yeah. So what would you say are some of the top reasons why a landlord would evict a tenant?
You know what I believe? I think it's probably for rent arrears, or just a very bolshy tenant that's always being over demanding, creating problems, creating disrepair issues, but blaming it on the fabric of the property. And an inexperienced landlord might not be able to deal with that. So they might just say, oh, they're causing me a lot of botheration. I didn't really charge enough for this property anyway. So let me get them out and get a new set of tenants in.
And what would you recommend, or what strategies do you have, or does your company support landlords with, or potential landlords with, ensuring that they have the right things in place to mitigate that risk?
Well, I'm really speaking to self-managing landlords or those that have a great deal of oversight on their properties. So I would say don't just give your property wholesalely to anybody, not the council, not your agent, not a rent-to-renter, not your best friend who's going to manage it for you, without putting in some independent oversight if you can't do it yourself. And to really manage the process. And a lot of landlords are also doing other activities. Maybe they're studying, maybe they've got full-time careers, and they believe they're burnt out. They believe that they can't take on any more information. They believe it to be very regulation heavy. But I think it's just a one-time process when you need to update yourself on everything that is currently in place, and then anything that comes in after that, you just have to update with that information once it becomes an act. So with the rights bill, you don't hear me talking about it all the time in the group, because at the moment everything's speculation. So you've got people writing books and offering training courses when at the end of each paragraph they have to say, well, we don't really know yet.
And you know what? It's like you were reading my mind, because I was going to ask you about these courses, because it seems like I can't go on YouTube or on social media without someone trying to pitch a course on how to become a property millionaire. Now, is it as easy as people make it look when they're selling these courses?
Well, I think that one, you've got to choose. So if you're going to buy something that's, say, more than an hour's drive away from where you live, I would say that you, in that local area, you need to find some key people to have in your team: a handyman, an inventory clerk, cleaner, whatever. And so therefore, when you're not able to get there to do these things themselves, and also landlords need to not do everything themselves, because you're not competent at doing mastic sealing, you're not competent at doing that little bit of carpentry, and we know that a poorly executed repair is harassment. So I would say buy a property which stacks, and by that I mean you bought it for the right amount, you've bought it in the right area for the right price, and then your repayment has to be feasible. So there's no point going for what I would call, in the old-fashioned term, a subprime mortgage, where it's interest only and the payments vary too widely. And then you have to run a strategy that yields you the most money. And if you're paying an agent a quite a significant proportion, that's where your profits are. And you
Mm.
do need to accumulate those profits and have a contingency. You need to have a fund in a separate account that you have for rainy days for your rental. And landlords, or have some insurance maybe,
Yeah.
or um, just have some kind of contingency.
Yeah, you have to have a plan. And from the mortgage perspective, it quite often it feels like people have seen things on TikTok or YouTube, or they just hear things in the ether, and they come to me as a broker and they have these exotic structures that they want to enter in. They've never had a property before. As you said, they don't have a team, but they're coming to a broker saying, I want X, Y, and Z, and they don't really understand how it works. So the contingency is really important. Most lenders are going to be looking to make sure that the rental income, and they're going to evaluate the rental income. They're not going to allow you to just say, well, I have a friend that will rent it for X. Most lenders are looking at least a 35% uplift on whatever the mortgage is. And if you're a high rate taxpayer, rule of thumb, it's about 45%. So the contingency is very important. And I keep hearing you say something that is alluding to the fact that you have to have a plan, you have to have a team, and you have to think things through. It's not something that you just jump into. It's not an overnight get rich quick scheme. It's not what you see on television. You buy a property, you flip it, then you move on to the next one. It's actually hard work. It's work that will and can be your pension in the future, but it's not just like set it and forget it, which is what I think a lot of the people that are selling these courses make you believe. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And the thing about these courses where they're selling you a strategy, be it HMO or rent to rent or deal sourcing or whatever it is, they don't tell you about compliance. So I've had great arguments on social media with people. So actually, the person was a best-selling HMO book writer, and they didn't believe that you needed to have client money protection, register with the ICO, be aware of anti-money laundering, and register with the HMRC if you hit those thresholds, and belong to a PRS. They just said you're trying to make landlords waste money, and I was like, when you get caught out and that penalty hits, um, that's when it becomes difficulty, because these things don't come along in isolation. You'll have health issues, you'll have busy family lives, you'll have other things going on, and now you've got to find 30,000, 10,000, 100,000 plus lawyers' fees.
Yeah. And what I found, and this is something that I say, and it's not a popular viewpoint, but I don't really care. I found that what happens quite often is you have people who start doing something. So there's a saying that things start as a cause, then they become a movement, then they become a business, then they become a scam. So what happens is you have a person that has a skill set or a knowledge. They realize that that skill set and knowledge is something that other people need. So I think quite often people start with the right intention. Then they learn about sales funnels and selling courses and all of these things. And they transition from actually making money doing the thing to making money selling the course about doing the thing. And so that's why when you say what you say, they're not going to actually like that, because you're saying, well, yeah, in theory, a lot of the stuff structurally that you're saying is correct. However, there are these nuances, but they know if they don't sell it in a way where it's going to just appeal to people's emotion, make people think it's quick and easy, they know people won't sign up for the course. And now that's their revenue stream. So their revenue stream is now selling the courses. So they want to make sure that they sell as many as they can. And the other point is, when it all goes left, when it all goes pear-shaped, as you said earlier, it's the individual that is held liable. So that
Exactly.
individual, quite often, that is selling the course, or doing the YouTube or doing stuff like this, and having conversations, quite often the disclaimer is, I'm not giving legal advice, I'm not giving property advice, this is for entertainment purposes only. And we have to do the disclaimers because we want to stay within the guidelines, and we understand that finance, property, medical advice, legal advice, these are very personal things. So you should always, always, always speak to a professional about your individual circumstances. However, it's also important to make sure that when you are talking about these things as a property professional, you are letting people know it's not easy. It may be simple. And I was talking to Muzzy the other day, and Muzzy was saying people confuse simple and easy. Something can be simple, and sometimes the simplicity is what makes it hard, because we want things to be more complicated. And so when someone's saying, do this, go to SmartLandlords, make sure that you speak to Pauline to get the right contracts in place, get the right fire doors up, to etc. That's simple,
Mm.
right? They just need to do what an expert like yourself tells them. But it's hard for them to do it because they want to believe that there's another way of doing it.
Exactly. So on these courses, often people are paying tens of thousands of pounds, and that's the money that you should be investing in your first property. Do you know what I mean? So
Yes.
even if it's not putting, directly in acquiring the property, you're going to have refurbishment costs, upgrading costs for fire safety if you're running a HMO. Fire doors are not cheap. You need it to be energy efficient, and that in itself can be a significant investment. So yeah, I just think that you kind of, and all the information that you're being taught in these classrooms is available for free on podcasts like this.
Yes.
And if you buy a book, watch some videos, listen to some podcasts, actually run your trials just the same way you go to a field or go out into your back garden and run your football training. It's the same for this. Go to whatever online, right moves, have a look at a property, have a look and see if you can guess how long it's been. What's the reason for its sale? Is it probate? Is it this? What's the situation? How can you put yourself ahead? And then by using, when we were on lockdown and people were doing video walkthroughs, and particularly 3D, you could almost see every aspect of the property. So you could say, does it need a new boiler? Let me have a look at that boiler in detail. And then just start scoping out what it's going to cost to get this renter ready. Take the vanity stuff out. My daughter refurbished during lockdown, and she put in a black suite for the shower and the shower screen and the taps and everything. Big mistake, because
Yeah.
limescale in London is a
Yeah.
major issue.
Yeah.
I said, leave the vanity things aside and go for practicalities. Go for what will last, what will hold up, what can be serviced. Um, but you have to live and learn. And the other thing they learned was they used family to refurbish, which was
Oh
great
boy.
because their dad's in construction.
Yeah.
But when they actually sat down after the fact, a long time after the fact, and worked it out, waiting for him to come and give them the odd evening was not practical. It meant that things were delayed. Whatever saving they were going to make was eroded away by dealing with somebody where it's such an informal arrangement.
You
And
know
so,
what, Pauline, you just hit a nerve, and you hit the nerve on the right day. Have you ever heard the expression, the soft bigotry of low expectations? You
no.
ever heard that? So this is saying the soft bigotry of low expectations. And the way that I would explain that is recently, I'm not going to say any names, but recently I was involved in something. And I got involved simply because of the person that introduced me to it, right? So it's not something that I would usually get involved in. And it was with a nonprofit organization. And anyone who knows me knows I'm a capitalist. I
Oh,
don't have much time for nonprofits. I don't have much time for CICs, although I sit on the board of a nonprofit for homeless people. But my main objection with most nonprofits and most CICs is they're poorly run, they're not professional, they're not efficient because their revenue comes from getting grants. So as long as they can write a good grant, etc. So I reluctantly got involved in this particular thing. And Pauline, I was blown away by how efficiently this particular thing was run. So I had a bias, or I have a bias against CICs, nonprofits, not for profits, etc. So, etc. So there's kind of like this soft bigotry that I have. But on the flip side, one of the things that I found, and I don't say this to toot my own horn, but to toot my own horn, I try to do things very systematically, very professionally. I'm very much about documentation to limit or eliminate miscommunication. And I don't get it right all the time, so I'm not saying that. But my intent is always to document, verify, explain. And I find that when certain people work with me, they're shocked when I'm efficient or when I document things or explain things or do things in a way that they would expect, from a large firm, but they don't expect from a smaller firm. So that's, again, that soft bigotry of a low expectation of what I do. And you and I have had several conversations just around the need and the requirement for us to deliver exceptional services all the time. Because all things being equal, I want to do business. If I could just do business with Jamaican people all day, I would, because that's my people. I understand the culture. I understand, the vernacular. I understand those things. But that's all things being equal. I'm not going to do business with a Jamaican person simply because they're Jamaican. I'm
Mm.
not going to spend more money with you just because your parents were born in the same country that my parents were born in. So I just feel that if we can continually improve the way we do things, have a higher expectation of each other, and I bang on about this all the time. Don't come to me for a deal. Come to me because I have the best service. Don't expect for me to reduce my rates, because you're not going to go to Halifax, or you're not going to walk into a branch of TSB and say, "Oh, can you, reduce?" You're going to take what they give you. So I think within your community, the smart landlords community, you have many, many professionals, and they're people that, when people approach them, they should be approaching them saying, "This is a professional. I respect what they do, and therefore I'm going to pay them if I can afford them. If you can't afford them, then just don't work with them. But don't expect people
Yeah.
to barter and do things for free."
Exactly. And be honest and say, this is the limit of what I can do. I really don't have any money. So can you help me? And so there's always what I call signposting. You can always maybe say to them, if the next person you go to who might be doing it for free, but then there will be hidden charges. They'll probably be ripping you off somewhere else by not taking you to the whole of market, or just putting shoddy deals in front of you. So that's what happens if you want something for free, that you're then at the behest of those who are gaming the system, sort of thing. So yeah, no, you're quite right. And that smart landlords originated because we were kind of focusing on the Windrush generation. I don't like that term, but but we know who we are at this stage, and associated communities. And we know that if there is a penalty to be paid, we're going to be paying a little bit more than some of the other communities that are around us. And that's fact. I don't have a study I can point you to, but we've got plenty of anecdotal experiences that point to that. So I think back in 2016, I noticed that a lot of landlords were being charged back council tax, because local authorities were realizing that they were running HMOs, or they'd subdivided their properties into self-contained units or whatever, and they were being penalized an awful lot. Because what they will do, that we don't realize, there's a lot of open source information out there. So I think it's from 1997 or something like that. If you've had a mortgage, they can search your address on this database, and they can see roughly when you took that mortgage out and what it was last sold for, in inverted commas.
Yeah.
And so then somebody can look at your title deed, because it's free access to get your land registry, and they can kind of work out how much equity you might have, just by maybe comparing it with things that have been sold more recently. So when they come with their £70,000 fines, they're kind of, part of that is estimating what can you afford, what can you raise, what potentially can you pay. And we're not diligent enough in saying, show me that calculation again, show me what it comprises of, what factors went into that. So we know that HHSRS, the healthy rating system that local authorities use, if they walk in on you and they find that you've infringed one of those 29, I think it is, hazards that are around. So we know extreme heat and extreme cold are the most common ones. But there are things like, electrocution, building is about to collapse, that kind of thing. So if your tenant is in danger of death from that, so we know that excess heat is heat stroke, excess cold is hypothermia, and people do die from those every year in this country. So we have to be discerning. So it's never, no, I'm not going to pay, but it's like, I need a little bit more information, and respond to these things early, so they don't turn into an enforcement notice and a penalty. Because at that stage, it's often a bit too late
Yeah.
to mitigate.
I want to bring out a point that you said, because you've said so many really good things, but I want to bring out a point that I always tell people, and this was even before AI. There's access to information. Lenders have access to information. Insurance companies have access to information. The industry shares a lot of information. So you're not fooling anyone. Like, quite often, I think people think that they're fooling or getting away. It may never come and bite you in the behind. That might be the case. It might not bite you in the behind. But don't think that you're fooling anyone or you're getting away with things, especially when you go to a mortgage broker. I see this all the time, and I've been doing finance for over 30 years. So one of the things that I can do is I can look at a person's credit profile, their bank statements, all the things that they need to bring in order for me to be able to do a mortgage for them. And that paints a picture. And then what will happen quite often is the picture that's painted forensically, the person's telling me something different. And I just say, listen, be honest with me, be upfront with me. Banks more likely than not can deal, especially specialist lenders, can deal with most things. But what they don't like is non-disclosure. What they don't like is lies, right? So it's better to be honest, that we can put a case forward where you are now operating within the criteria of that product, that you're not putting yourself in a situation that, as you were saying, Pauline, if 7 years later they now want to retroactively start to enforce something, you're in harm's way.
Yeah.
So just want to really stress to everybody, just be honest. Be forthright. It may cost you a little bit more. So, don't buy the dodgy fire door to save some money. Just get the actual real fire door.
Yeah,
Do you know what
yeah.
I'm saying? And quite often, I think the frustrating thing is people want to make money, but they don't want to spend money to make that money. So they want to cut corners and not pay the professional or not get the right thing or the right inspection, or they'd rather pay someone £50 extra to do a dodgy inspection than just to get the thing done properly. And
Like, I do get that an awful lot. People that want these property checks done, but it's like, oh, just give me a piece of paper that says that you've done it. And it's like, that's not really how it works, particularly with fire safety. Obviously, I'm putting my professionalism and my reputation on the line when I give you that certificate. So it can't just be, and it's not a pass or fail. It's something that's supposed to demonstrate the way that you're operating.
yeah, yeah. And it's there to protect you. It's there to protect your tenants. So we've had I think, a very good conversation around several things. Now, I just would like for you to give just three pieces of advice to anyone who's considering becoming a landlord, and maybe tell us how people could get in contact with you and some of the services that you offer.
Exactly. So the first piece of advice is, don't be in fear. So, or at least be in face everything and rise form of fear, not in the fear everything can run. And look after your own mindset. Be composed. So it's just like when you do stock market training, they say that you've got to know your own risk adversity, and you can't make decisions if you're stressed. Same with a landlord. So we know that the best creative state is one that is calm, where you've got your fight and flight under control, and you're able to make those creative decisions. Two, be open to learning. Um, Learning is a lifelong thing. We're never out of learning, but just be open and receptive to it. So if you say, I'm full, I'm overwhelmed, that's how your body will respond to the new information that you're taking on. And three, I would just say, this is something that needs property, is something that needs is a whole family activity, because eventually it should be going into a trust. So trust is about, it is a structure that where you can hold your assets, but it's also about the relationship you have with people.
Yeah.
So actively work on building trust with your tenants, with your clients, with your family, most importantly.
I like that because that's one of the things that often gets overlooked in this conversation. I I've been in this situation myself, and I look back and I'm like, that was dumb. So I've been in situations where my mom owned a house, I owned a house, my sister owned a house, and all three of us are struggling. Instead of combining our resources and saying, well, I'm going to sacrifice maybe my independence for a while for the short term for a long term gain.
Exactly.
And quite often we don't look to family and friends and say, well, listen, let's in the short term maybe make a sacrifice. That might mean we're living together, sharing resources while we're saving up money to buy a property cash or have a higher deposit. And you mentioned the Windrush. I know from speaking to my grandmothers, both of them, when they first came over, that was their strategy. They had something called a partner. And
Oh
they
yeah.
put all their money together. And different cultures have similar ways of doing that. But it seems like we've moved so far away from that community approach. And obviously, you can't trust everybody, and you don't want to be in business with everyone because you shouldn't be unevenly yoked. But you should be able to find a group of people that you trust and you can share resources, skills. It's not just about money because you spoke about, someone might have a skill and a business, not just as a side hustle, as you said, that they're going to come and do the refurb over, 17 weeks because they can only come over on weekends, but someone that actually has a business where they do this full time and you can work something out that you can build that legacy. And you mentioned about trusts. So what would you say are the two key services that you offer?
So one is my role as an assessor, doing all the checks that landlords need. And then the other is as the curator of the Smart Landlords group, where we actively support landlords. So we have something called Smart Solutions, and where you can come and do a discovery call with us, and then sit down through a whole um, shopping list is probably the wrong term of topics where we can support you. So common ones are, I need help with an estate agent that's allowed the tenants to trash my home. That's quite a common theme that came up in the group today, but it's quite a common scenario that people come to me in a one-to-one. And things like reviewing a tenancy agreement. So if you do something like reviewing a tenancy agreement, because of the nature of the agreement, you get the whole overview of the tenancy theatre. So doing those kinds of things with Smart Landlord is quite helpful. We're unique in that we're not offering the courses that other people offer. We,
Yeah.
we want to arm your business. And then we also do training. So I will train you to be a pack tester. A lot of it will be what I call self-study. But I will look, there's a practical side where I can support you in going into that property for the first time in a scenario where everything's unfamiliar and get you through it. Same with inventories, same. And then if you do inventory training, then of course you can be doing the midterm checks on your own property.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, properties are so different, and there's so many different elements that when you're looking and you don't know what it is, it's not helpful. So this, a lot of what we do comes with booklets, with what I call kind of pictorial dictionaries, where and then you've got that opportunity where I'm quite accessible still, where you can contact me and say, what is this?
Yeah.
And
And,
I
and in
can
the
more or
group,
less tell you.
that's one of the great things about the group. There's always different bits of information. I remember September, I think it was of 2024. I say that because we don't know when people are going to be watching this video. Prior to the changes in the right to buy scheme, you put something in the group, and a lot of people weren't aware of the pending changes in November. So you gave people the heads up, and then there was myself and some other brokers in the group that were then able to assist people in beating that November 19th deadline. People, I have a couple of deals that are getting ready to complete where people have saved £136,000. So they got their maximum discount. But as we close, Pauline, I just want to thank you. Your information will be in the description of this video. So what is the first stage as far as people getting in contact with you?
Well, just send me an email, info@smartlandlordsgroup.com. reach out to me through you, Anthony, if they want to join the Smart Landlords group, or if they'd like to connect with me another way other than via email. And yeah, I'm very approachable, very approachable.
All right, so I'm gonna just talk a little bit more about getting a mortgage, because in order to be a landlord, you may need that mortgage, you may need a buy-to-let mortgage, or you may need a remortgage. Thank you so much, Pauline. The information, as I said, will be in the description, where people will be able to book a discovery call with you, and you'll be able to answer some additional questions. So, as I said, my name is Anthony Lindsay, and I have been doing finance. I've been in finance for over 30 years. If you'd like to book an appointment, you can just scan the QR code or look in the description. If you're in the UK and you're looking to purchase a property and you are a first-time buyer, you may not understand what the process is. So you want to make sure and go to a broker. A broker is going to give you choice, service, and they'll also talk to you about protection, which is insurance, which is very important, because you don't want to get in the property and then in the event of sickness or accident or a critical illness, you're unable to keep up your mortgage payments. The perfect profile, which I very rarely come across as far as a mortgage client, is someone with a UK passport, is PAYE employed, high salary, good credit rating, and a high deposit. But we work with specialist lenders. So if you fall short on any or all of those areas, we can still help you either get a residential or a buy-to-let property. The key stages are the first conversation with your mortgage broker. As I said during the conversation, make sure you're honest, make sure you're open. A good mortgage broker will be able to get you a mortgage. As long as you're upfront with them and they understand what they're working with, they'll be able to partner you with the best lender. So the first stage is just having that conversation. Then it moves into what's called the agreement in principle. That's when the initial approach to a lender happens. And that's usually not a hard credit score. It's usually not the point where the bank is verifying all the information. It's just where a conversation has been had, an overview has been given to that lender or keyed in on the website, that they can say, well, based on the information that's been put in, this is how much you would be able to get for a mortgage. So that's the agreement in principle. It's called an agreement in principle, a decision in principle, a mortgage in principle. The next part is, if you're looking for a new property, that's when you would search. I do offer a free help to find service, where as long as I understand what you're looking for and what your needs are, I can go into Smart Landlords group and other different groups that I'm in to see if I can support you with finding that property. Once you've found the property and you've had an offer accepted, and I do offer a negotiation service, once you've had that offer accepted, that's when we would do the full mortgage application. That's when the formal request to the lender takes place. That's when the lender would do the full credit score. They do a valuation of the property. And remember, it's a valuation and not a survey. Two different things. So the valuation is where the bank assesses what they feel the value of that property is. By this point, you should have already had a solicitor in place. Don't go with the cheapest solicitor. It's about service. Remember, purchasing a property is as fast as the slowest person. So you don't want your solicitor to hold up a deal, because time kills deals. So once you have that valuation done, then you get the offer, then the legal and conveyancing starts to take place, and then you go to exchange of contracts and completion. Remember, you're not usually looking for a mortgage, you're looking for a home, or you're looking for a buy-to-let property. And mortgage is a necessary part of that unless you're buying cash. Make sure you work with a broker you trust, a broker who has come to you referred by someone who has actually used that broker and knows that they will do the very best job for you. A few tips. Make sure that you have your deposit in one place. It makes it a little bit easier as far as tracing or confirming the source of funds. it's a good idea to put those savings in a high interest savings account. I usually recommend that people go to Money Savings Expert, that you can research some high interest savings accounts, because the money for your deposit does not come out of your bank account until pretty late in the process. So you could be making some money each month in interest. Clean up your credit profile. Make sure you don't apply for any additional loans or any additional credit, simply because those are things that can either prevent you from getting the original deal that you discussed, or maybe it can prevent you from actually getting the mortgage. I did have a client once where we had done the mortgage offer. In between that and the completion, they went out and took out a huge loan and could no longer afford the mortgage that we had gotten them the offer on. So always make sure that you do your due diligence, prepare yourself, research, talk to professionals, and ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. So from here, if you look in the description, you get my information. If you're looking to become a landlord, or you want to understand or look into some property strategies, make sure you read the description. Make sure you reach out to Pauline. I'll also put a link for the SmartLandlords group. It's a fantastic group. There's tons of brokers in there, accountants, and property professionals. It's always good to be able to share this information with people, and I appreciate everyone listening. And make sure that you like, share, and subscribe, because we are here to help give you the information that you need to make informed choices. If you don't have a broker and you'd like to speak to someone, I'd love to talk to you. My name is Anthony Lindsay. My phone number will be in the description, and I've been in finance for over 30 years.